I always like to have this disclaimer that I make. My head does all kinds of funny movements, usually up and down, usually nodding. It's from some medication that I take, and it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily agreeing with anybody. So a little background hopefully will be helpful. One of the reasons that I got into peer support was, particularly in mental health, was that there was nothing quite like it when I was going through the worst of my times. And so what I found is that my community became a community of professionals. And with that, I started to feel like all of my relationships were about fixing me or helping me. And I found that I sort of lost my ability to be kind of a regular community member. I came out of a program that was working with women in domestic violence. And what I found was that that whole community of people were actually naturally supporting one another. It was a very peer-oriented movement. But we really had nothing like it in mental health. We had situations where people would be together, but it was much more of a sort of social medical focus. For an independent peer support program in where I live in New Hampshire, and the sky was the limit. I mean, we could really do with it whatever we wanted. We were very lucky. We could actually be sort of defining what it is that we wanted to do. We were not under any mandates. People had no other friends to go to be with in the community. So this became a place where people could try out different kinds of relationships, a non-professional relationship, because many of us had forgotten how to be in, as I said, in mutual relationships. And if Erie can hold on to all this, I'll tell a little story. People who came to this program initially had spent a lot of time in the mental health system. And so it was all that they knew. And the first Thanksgiving that we were open, we have a big holiday of Thanksgiving where people celebrate with a big meal often. And it was intriguing because the culture of help was so embedded that when we talked about having a supper together, a dinner together, and we started to talk about how we'd organize it, people assumed that I would do all the work and that they would just show up and eat, because that's what they'd been used to in hospital. I had no particular interest in starting a program where I was there to serve everybody. I mean, it just didn't make sense. We were all in the same boat. So we decided that everybody would either do something or bring something. And it was just the most interesting experience, because many people who'd been institutionalized had no idea about cooking, no idea about sort of organizing a dinner. They wanted to leave it up to me, so we decided that everybody would do something. And so what happened was, one person who had been a cook in his past life was able to do much of the cooking, but everybody brought something. And we sat down together, and it was the most raucous, most energizing dinner, because everybody had brought a little bit of the best of them and contributed to a meal that then became the metaphor for how we wanted to do peer support. I thought that was such a good metaphor, was that it was about everybody's best side coming forward and contributing to something bigger than the rest of us. And that was such a distinction from the kinds of relationships that we'd had that considered everybody else in our lives to be helpers for us. And that became the theme. The idea was that peer support becomes something that everybody contributes to, that with the expectation that everybody is there to learn. And out of that, we were able over the years to develop a program where we taught peer support, but also a hospital alternative, a crisis alternative, where people could come in the worst of times, and instead of coming to a place and being taken care of, they would come to a place to be in a community that was supportive, and to continue to be a participant in their own lives and in their own recovery.